There's nothing that is better than Jesus, and there is no day that is better than this day. We are so glad you're here. There are a couple of things, I love that you are rowdy today. There are a couple of things about today that make today a great day that I just want to highlight and celebrate before I let you grab a seat. Number one, the tomb is empty. And number two, the Easter baskets are full, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah. You guys go ahead and grab a seat. While you do, I want to talk to the children for just a minute. I do know that there are a lot of kids who are in the room with us today, and I just want to educate our kids on what makes for a quality Easter basket. Because the truth is, there are some Karens in the world who are ripping kids off, and I'm not okay with that. And so I just want to bring all the children up to speed on what really makes for a quality Easter basket. The first thing that you gotta have, and there are four things all in all, but the first thing you gotta have are the Reese's peanut butter eggs. Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but this is actually what Jesus and his disciples ate for dessert at the Last Supper. It's in the Greek. You may not be able to read it, but I can. And so here you go, kids. Enjoy some Reese's peanut butter eggs. Wow, we took a dive for that. Second thing that you need, all right? Might want to rethink throwing stuff out from the stage. Somebody's gonna get hurt. Second thing that you need are the Reese's Pieces, right? I don't know if you know this. See, I was worried about the kids because I know that it looks like a carrot. It's the color of a carrot. It's shaped like a carrot, but it doesn't taste like a carrot. And so you gotta trust me on that. Enjoy some Reese's Pieces, okay? Here you go. Third thing that you need in your Reese's basket or in your Easter basket, gonna be some jelly beans, okay? Now listen to me, okay? You gotta know this about these, okay? Your grandmother loves them, but that's also why she doesn't have any teeth, okay? So there's a limited window on this. You better eat them while you can. Let's go a little deeper there. And then there's one more thing that you gotta have in your Easter basket. Does anybody even know what it is? No, listen. It's not candy. It's cold, hard cash, okay? Yeah, I'm not giving you my cash. Nice try. I want you to look at your neighbor and say, if there ain't no cash, your basket is trash. Go ahead and say that to him. Go ahead and say that to him. There you go. But we are so excited about this special day. But before I go on, I've told you everything that you need in your Easter basket, but I did not tell you the one thing you do not want to see in your Easter basket. You ready for this? It's the hollow chocolate bunny, okay? No, you do not want this in your basket because this thing is built on a lie, okay? It looks like a delicious brick of chocolate, right? But then you bite into this thing and it literally crumbles like your dreams, okay? This thing is not what you think it is. Now, I'm curious, is there anybody in the room who actually disagrees with me and you love the hollow chocolate bunny, okay? Lots of hands, wow. I had no idea that many people could be wrong, right? The thing I hate about the hollow chocolate bunny is that it concerns me. But because what we know about the hollow chocolate bunny is that this thing is beautiful on the outside, but it's empty on the inside, right? Have you ever noticed this? That this is not just true about a chocolate bunny. This is my fear for so many people in our world today. That yes, on Easter, we all look good on the outside, but there is an emptiness on the inside. On the inside, there is no hope. On the inside, there is no peace. On the inside, there is no purpose because on the inside, there is no Jesus. And so if that's the way you feel today, I just want you to know we're really glad that you came to this service because we want to make sure that that gets corrected before you leave. This Easter, We're doing a lot of things here that we've never done before. One of the things we've never done before is celebrate the resurrection of Jesus with 5,000 or 6,000 of our closest friends. But how cool is this? Yes, it's amazing. But the other thing that we've never done on Easter is we've never concluded a study of the Bible on Easter Sunday. And yet we've been studying the book of Jonah now for a couple of months. And today I want to wrap up that entire study on Easter Sunday, because I know that there are a lot of people who are checking out Mosaic for the very first time. And what we don't want to do is just do some standalone message. We want to instead give you a real glimpse into what Mosaic Church is like every single week. And so to dive into this last message in a series called Lessons from a Man Who Ran, I want you to check out this video. Over the course of my life, there have been multiple times when I have run from God. I'm not proud of that, and I don't like to admit that in front of so many people, but I found that in my life I was running, but I was running in different seasons for different reasons. In one season of my life when I was young, I thought I knew everything, and I was running from God in large part because it was really hard for me to believe. As a young man, I thought I knew everything. I had all the answers and felt like I just could not agree with the truthfulness of the Bible. I felt like I had so many questions that just couldn't be answered. And so I was running from God because it was hard for me to believe. But if I'm really honest with you, there were other seasons in my life when I was running from God, not because it was hard for me to believe, but because I just didn't want to believe. I knew that if I believed, then there were some things in my life that were going to have to change. And the truth is, I did not want to change. And so I did not want to believe. And so let me ask you, when it comes to the stories of the Bible, and I mean the miraculous stories of the Bible, stories like Jonah and the whale, stories like Jesus being raised from the dead, is it that you can't believe, or is it that you just don't want to believe? I don't want you to answer out loud, but I really do want you to answer that question honestly in your mind. The story of Jonah and the whale? The resurrection of Jesus? Can't believe it, or just don't want to believe it? In Matthew chapter 12, and again in Matthew chapter 16, Jesus is actually talking about Jonah on two separate occasions. And when he talks about Jonah, he's speaking to different groups of people, but his messages to these people, it almost sounds identical. In both cases, Jesus is comparing what happened in Jonah's life to what is getting ready to happen in his own life. It's almost like Jesus understands that that ancient story is so hard to believe Just like the story of the resurrection is going to be really, really hard for some people to believe. But Jesus makes this comparison. He uses this ancient story from the past to try to prepare people for his resurrection in the future. And so I'm going to read both accounts out of Matthew 12 and Matthew 16, just a few verses in each chapter. Listen to what we're told, Matthew 12, 38 to 41. Then some of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law said to him, "Teacher, we want to see a sign from you." He answered, "A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but none will be given it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will stand up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and now something greater than Jonah is here." Now, I want you to listen to a very similar story, Matthew 16, verses 1 through 4, just a few chapters later. The Pharisees and the Sadducees came to Jesus and tested him by asking him to show them a sign from heaven. He replied, "When evening comes, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, today it will be stormy, for the sky is red and overcast. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. A wicked and adulterous generation looks for a sign, but none will be given it except the sign of Jonah." Jesus then left them and went away. Now let's start today with a really easy question. It's a personal question in your life. How many of you know someone who is always repeating themselves, but they don't even realize it? Let's just see your hands. No, I didn't say point at them. I said just raise your hands, okay? You don't have to point. Yes, we all know people like that. And when you read these two accounts, it almost sounds like Matthew is having a little bit of a senior citizens moment, if you know what I'm saying. He's told the story back in chapter 12. He's writing away about the life and the times of Jesus, and it's almost like he forgets that he's already told us this story, and now he's writing it again here in chapter 16. But that is not what's happening. If you look a little bit more carefully at these two accounts, you'll see that in chapter 12, Jesus was speaking with two groups of people, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. And then if you look in Matthew chapter 16, Jesus is speaking with other people, the Pharisees, and specifically a group of people that were called the Sadducees. Now, you don't need to know a lot about these different groups of people, but what you do need to know is that they all struggled to follow Jesus, but for very different reasons. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they did not want to believe. Whereas the Sadducees were the kinds of people where it was just hard for them to believe. And so I just want to break down both groups of people. Let's start with those who just don't want to believe. Can we just admit and agree that there are some people in the world who don't want to believe in God or in the story of Jesus or in the power and the truthfulness of the resurrection? That they don't want to believe it. It's not that they have some intellectual argument to consider that says, though the Bible's not true or the resurrection could have never happened. It's not for them that they can't believe. The real issue is that they just don't want to believe, because the truth is there are some things in their lives that they don't want to change. Listen to me. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they may have been religious people, but they were also the kinds of people who had some things going on in their lives that they didn't want to change, and so they did not want to believe. That these Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they were the kinds of religious people that maybe you've met over the course of your life. They loved control. They loved power. They loved to be the center of attention. The problem is that they used their knowledge and their power to beat other people down and to simultaneously lift themselves up. They were very judgmental. They acted like they were never wrong. They acted like they were so smart and everyone else was so stupid, especially when it came to God. So these guys are running all over town and they're teaching people and demeaning people and beating people down. And then one day Jesus shows up. And when Jesus shows up, Jesus starts teaching, but he's teaching in a very different way. When Jesus teaches, he's not beating people down. Jesus was always building people up. He was using very clear analogies and illustrations that made it easy for people to understand. He wasn't asking questions that would trip them up and make them look stupid. He would give them wisdom and answers so that their faith might grow. And I'm telling you that people loved him for it. You see, the truth is, in Jesus' day and still in our day, most people don't have a problem with Jesus. Their problem is with the church. People in Jesus' day who weren't very religious, they loved Jesus, but they did not like the Pharisees. Now, as you might imagine, that created a problem. The problem was that Jesus' crowds are getting bigger and bigger, while their crowds are getting smaller and smaller. These guys became extremely jealous of Jesus, and because of that, they did not want to believe. They didn't want to believe in Jesus. They didn't want to believe in his resurrection, because if Jesus was God and if Jesus really could raise himself from the dead, then all of the power and all of the attention belongs to him, not them. If Jesus was God and if Jesus could really raise himself from the dead, then that means that he is right. And it means that they were wrong. And so these people, they did not want to believe. Now, the Sadducees, they're a completely different flavor altogether. These guys were like the philosophers of their day. These were people who were very in tune with what was happening in the physical world. They studied it all the time. But the truth is, they weren't in tune with what was happening in the spiritual world. For them, the way their brains were wired, it wasn't that they didn't want to believe or that they had a problem with Jesus. The real issue is that it was just hard for them to believe in something like a resurrection or an afterlife, because it's not concrete, it's hard to prove. And so if you're here today and you do not consider yourself a follower of Jesus, you don't call yourself a Christian, you don't really see yourself as a person of faith, I suspect that you fit into one of those two categories. And so let me ask you again, which one is it? Is it that you can't believe, or is it that you just don't want to believe? See, the beauty of Easter is that it confronts both kinds of people. It confronts the Pharisees in us who don't want to believe because we don't want to change. And then it also confronts the Sadducees in us who struggle to believe in something or someone that we can't see. Easter confronts everyone in the world, those who can't believe and those who don't want to believe. As the story is unfolding in the book of Matthew, it becomes really clear that these three religious groups of people, they all want the same thing from Jesus. They all want proof. And so they say to Jesus in these discussions, Jesus, if you are really God, if you are really the Savior of the world, don't just claim it, you need to prove it. In Matthew chapter 12 and again in Matthew chapter 16, they all ask Jesus for the same thing. They want a sign. Like so many people in our world today, they're basically saying, I have to see it to believe it. And if I'm honest with you, I get that. I get that. especially because of the world that we live in today. There are so many scam artists. There's so much AI-generated content in the world. There's so much misinformation, so much fake news that it's hard to know what should I believe and what should I not believe anymore. And so you want proof. If you look back in Matthew 16, verses 2 and 3, Jesus says, if you people want to talk about signs, then let's talk about signs. Listen to what he said. He replied to them, when evening comes, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red, and in the morning today it will be stormy, for the sky is red and overcast. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. How many of you have ever heard that old phrase, red skies at night, sailors delight, red skies in the morn, sailors be warned? Anybody ever heard that on the coast? Yeah, you didn't know. That came out of the Bible, right? It's an old way of people being able to look at the skies or look at the signs to see what's about to happen with the weather. Jesus is saying, you people are really, really great at reading those types of physical signs. And the truth is, we're even better at it today than they were back then. We've got organizations like NOAA. We've got weather apps on our phone. We really want to be able to know what is going to happen in the physical world. We've developed radar and satellite technology. We're really good at predicting what will happen in the physical world. But we're not in tune at all with the spiritual world. You know why? Because we don't really care about the spiritual nearly as much as we care about the physical. That is the point that Jesus is making. We care about what the weather is going to be doing on our days off. We care about what the weather is going to be doing at our kids' ball game. We care about the hurricanes that threaten all of our material possessions that may destroy our homes or our boats or our jet skis. And so we're really in tune with what is happening in the physical world. But Jesus goes, you guys are not giving enough attention to what is happening in the spiritual world. In both Matthew 12 and again in Matthew 16, when people asked for a sign, Jesus said that you people are a wicked and adulterous generation. Now that is harsh, maybe even offensive language to everyone who would have heard it. But do you know why Jesus said that? Because he knew. It's not that they can't believe. The real problem is that they don't want to believe. They're obsessed with the here and the now. They could care less about the later. They care a lot about the physical world, not so much about the spiritual world. And so they're asking for a sign. Jesus, prove it. Now, think about this. By Matthew chapter 16, Jesus has already given them all kinds of signs and all kinds of reasons to believe. At one point, earlier in his ministry, Jesus is hanging out at one of his best friend's house, a guy named Peter. And while they're hanging out together, there's some people who show up that are sick. You know what Jesus did for them? He healed them. At another point, a military leader shows up and says, Jesus, I've got this servant who is gravely ill. And so you know what Jesus did for him? Jesus healed him. The New Testament tells us that Jesus healed people who had skin diseases called leprosy. He healed people who were paralyzed. He healed others who were blind. Jesus even healed a woman who had been bleeding internally for 12 years. The Bible says that she had spent every penny she had seeing the doctors, but her condition only grew worse, and yet Jesus healed her. Another man comes to Jesus and he says, my little girl is so sick, she's about to die. Jesus, would you heal her? And so Jesus says, I'd love to heal her. And so they start to make their way to this man's house, but the little girl dies before Jesus gets there. And so you know what Jesus did? Jesus raised that little girl from the dead. At another occasion, there was a large crowd of people, probably more than the number of people in this room. They had been listening to Jesus teach all day. They were getting hungry. Jesus said, we got to give them something to eat. And so he finds this little boy who's got a lunchbox. He goes, what's in your lunchbox? And he says, I got some fish and some bread. Jesus prays over what's in that lunchbox, and he feeds every single person in the crowd. Jesus has already given them all kinds of signs. All in all, the New Testament records 37 different miracles that Jesus performed. And now, after all of that, they want a sign. And so you know what Jesus does? Jesus confronts the real problem. He highlights that they don't want to believe because they are wicked. There's something in the human heart. There's something in the human soul that is broken, even if you're religious. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they've got something in their heart that is broken. These guys care more about playing God than actually knowing God. They care more about preserving their own power than experiencing his power. They're addicted to the attention. They're motivated by the money, whatever it was. Jesus made it clear, you people can believe, you just don't want to believe because there is something that is broken in your psyche and in your soul. Sadly, the world has not changed that much in the last 2,000 years. There are a lot of people in our world today who just don't want to believe. We don't want to believe because we like sleeping around and looking at porn. We don't want to believe, but because we like the parties, the drinking, and the drugs. We don't want to believe because we think that life would be more fun without God than with God. We don't want to believe because we would rather spend our weekends traveling and hunting and fishing and golfing and boating, even working, but not worshiping. That is why Jesus said, you are a wicked and adulterous generation. He's telling these people, you've got another love in your life and it's keeping you from loving me. You could believe, but the truth is, you don't want to believe. The other group of people, they're struggling in a completely different way. The Sadducees, remember, they are wired up in such a way and their brains work in such a way that it's not so much that they don't want to believe as much as it's just hard for them to believe. And so you know what Jesus did? He said, I'm going to give you one more sign because he wants them to believe. Jesus doesn't want to judge people. Jesus doesn't want to condemn people. Jesus wants to help these people because he loves these people. And so if one more sign is what they need, then one more sign is what they will get. You know what the sign was? An empty tomb. In Matthew chapter 16, verse 4, and Matthew chapter 12, verse 39, he called it the sign of Jonah. And for them, this was a story that they would have all been familiar with, maybe even had it memorized in their minds. But he's going to clarify and explain the story just so it's clear to them and just so it's clear to us. In Matthew chapter 12, verse 40, Jesus said, for as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Now, I want you to think about that. Jonah lived roughly 750 to 800 years before the time of Jesus, which means that approximately 800 600 years before Jesus would ever die on a cross and be placed in a tomb, God was orchestrating events in this world and then documenting them so that we today would have signs or proof of who Jesus was and what Jesus came to do. That's what the story of Jonah was. It was one big sign. If you look at Jonah, it will lead you to Jesus. If you don't know the story of Jonah, Jonah was running from God. Jonah thought, I'm going to get on this boat and I'm going to get as far away from God as I can possibly get. In that moment, God sends a storm on the sea, not to punish him, but to stop him from running, not to pay him back, but to bring him back. And in the middle of this violent storm, the sailors who were on the boat with him, they realized something. They realized the only way for us to live is for Jonah to be sacrificed. And so they picked Jonah up and they sacrificed him by throwing him into the sea. And when they did, that storm became completely calm and there was finally peace in their lives because of Jonah's reluctant sacrifice. I'm telling you, if you look at Jonah, it will lead you to Jesus. Just think about that part of the story in light of what Jesus is now saying in Matthew 12, verse 41. Jesus declares something or someone greater than Jonah is here. Jesus is not like Jonah who is running from God. He is greater than Jonah in that he always obeyed God. Jesus did not want to go to the cross any more than Jonah wanted to go to the city of Nineveh, but he did it because he was on a mission to save people from their sins. I'm telling you, the only way for you to live was for Jesus to be sacrificed. And so that's what he did. He died on a Roman cross for the sins of anyone and everyone who would choose to believe in him. But that was not the end of the story. Just like Jonah would spend 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a great fish, Jesus would spend 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the earth. And when all of that time was up, Jesus would come out of the grave just like Jonah came out of that fish. Jesus said, you people want a sign? This is the last sign that I will ever give anyone. For all of those who will ever say, I can't believe. Jesus did something to make it possible for you to believe. He predicted his own resurrection, and then he made it happen. And now here we are, over 2,000 years later, and people all over the world are celebrating today that the tomb is empty. Yeah. For those people who believe that the tomb is empty, their life is full. Their life is full of joy. Their life is full of peace. Their life is full of purpose. Their life is full of hope because their life is filled with Jesus. It doesn't mean that life is perfect, but it does mean that life is a whole lot better because we know that no matter what this world throws at us, in the end, we win. And so let me ask you one more time, what's the real problem? Is the real problem that you can't believe or that you just don't want to believe? Whatever group you are in, I need you to know that the resurrection of Jesus is an historical reality, regardless of what you think about it or how you feel about it. The tomb was empty, not metaphorically. Not poetically, not symbolically. I'm talking physically, historically, and undeniably. I could give you a dozen different books to read. You can go home this afternoon and tune into the Joe Rogan podcast where he interviewed Wesley Huff after Wesley Huff absolutely destroyed Billy Carson in a debate over these very issues. The bottom line is that this event happened, and now you have to decide if you will believe it or not. For those of you who have always thought, I can't believe, oh yes you can. There are all kinds of good reasons to believe. For every question, there is a strong answer. For every doubt, there is a great explanation. God is not asking you to take a leap of faith. He's asking you to exercise reasonable faith. The 37 different miracles are reason enough to believe. The fulfilled prophecies are reason enough to believe. The sign of Jonah is reason enough to believe. And yes, the empty tomb is reason enough to believe. Don't tell me that you can't believe, because the truth is you can believe. For those of you who are honest enough to admit it, that you just don't want to believe, I want to challenge you to take a long, hard look at your life and ask yourself, if eternity is hanging in the balance, is it really worth it? Maybe today you've been running after everything this world has to offer, and in the process, you never even realized that you were running from God. If that's you, would you confess today that you have loved the things of this world even more than you love the one who made the world? If that's you, would you confess to God that you did not want to believe because you did not want to change? Would you tell God that you may not want to believe, but that you do believe and that you need to believe because there is something broken in your soul and there is something that is missing in your life? Let's pray together. God, today we recognize that there are all kinds of people who are in the room. I know, God, that you came for both kinds of people, and I thank you for that. And so, God, for those who have been running from you, whether it's because it's been hard to believe or they just don't want to believe, I pray, God, that this would be a defining moment in their life. God, I pray that you would cause them to put their faith in Jesus and to believe this ancient story that makes us right with you. If you're here today and you've never put your faith in Jesus, I want to lead you to do that right now. Right where you sit, you can pray a simple prayer to God. He hears you whether it's silent or vocal. You can pray and say, Jesus, I need you. I confess that I have run from you. Maybe out of doubt, maybe out of pride, but today I believe that you died for me. I believe you rose from the grave. I believe that you are alive, and I believe that you love me. And so today I'm going to stop running from you and surrender my life to you. God, would you forgive me of my sins? Would you fill me with your Spirit? Would you change my heart? I pray all of these things in Jesus' powerful name. Amen.